Susan Dey was born on December 10, 1952, in Pekin, Illinois. She became famous in the 1970s when she played Laurie Partridge on the popular TV show The Partridge Family. At just 17 years old, she quickly became a teen idol. People loved her for her fresh image, natural beauty, and the warmth she brought to her character. But while fans saw her smiling on screen, Susan was quietly dealing with serious struggles behind the scenes. The sudden fame brought pressure that Susan wasn't prepared for. Being on television each week and living under the spotlight made her feel like she had to be perfect all the time. That pressure affected her deeply. During the years she worked on the Partridge Family, Susan developed anorexia. She later said that she was barely eating and dropped to an unhealthy weight. She was trying to keep control of something in her life when everything around her felt overwhelming. One of the most complicated parts of her time on the show was her relationship with her co-star David Cassidy, who played her older brother Keith Partridge. Susan had strong feelings for David. She fell in love with him quietly, hoping he might one day feel the same way. But at the time, David didn't return those feelings. He saw her as a friend and co-star. This was heartbreaking for Susan, though she kept her pain private and didn't let it show to the public. After the show ended in 1974, Susan and David did eventually become closer and had a brief romantic relationship. But the relationship didn't last, and it left Susan feeling rejected and hurt. Still, she kept these personal matters to herself and tried to move on with her life and career. For years, she avoided talking publicly about her time with David. She didn't want her private experiences turned into gossip. Then, in 1994, everything changed when David Cassidy released his autobiography titled Come On, Get Happy: Fear and Loathing on the Partridge Family Bus. In the book, David wrote about his time on the show and shared stories from his personal life. But in one part, he casually mentioned a night he had spent with Susan, implying that they had slept together. For David, it seemed like just another story. But for Susan, it felt like a deep betrayal. David had taken a very private moment and shared it with the world. He didn't ask her permission. He didn't think about how it might hurt her. He revealed something she had tried to keep hidden for decades, and he did it without apology or regret. For Susan, this wasn't just about one night. It was about trust. She had trusted him, and he broke that trust in a very public and painful way. This moment became a turning point for Susan. After the book came out, she made a choice. She didn't speak publicly about what David had written. She didn't try to fight back or correct the story. Instead, she stayed silent. But her silence said a lot. She stopped appearing in interviews about the Partridge family. She refused to take part in any reunion specials. Whenever her former castmates appeared together on talk shows or in documentaries, Susan was missing. Her absence was noticed by fans, and people began to wonder why she always stayed away. Some believed she simply wanted to leave the past behind. Others thought she had lost interest in acting or didn't like fame anymore. But those who knew her better understood that her decision had everything to do with the pain she felt from David's betrayal. It wasn't just about hurt feelings or a lost romance. It was about someone she had once cared for breaking her trust in a way that she could never forget. At one point, a former associate who had worked on the show spoke about Susan's feelings toward David. Speaking anonymously, this person said, "He's an evil piece of..." The anger and pain in their words showed just how deeply Susan had been wounded. It wasn't the kind of pain that fades over time. It was the kind that sticks with you, especially when the person who hurt you never apologizes. Susan could have chosen to smile for the cameras and pretend everything was fine. She could have joined reunion shows and stood beside David as if nothing had happened. But that would have meant betraying herself. It would have meant putting on an act for the sake of appearances. Susan refused to do that. She chose honesty. She chose silence over lies. She chose her dignity over nostalgia. Even though it was a harder path, it was the one she believed in. She didn't want to relive the past. She didn't want to reopen wounds that had barely healed. She didn't want to smile next to the man who had humiliated her. So, she stayed away. And by doing so, she protected her peace. When David Cassidy died on November 21, 2017, fans around the world were heartbroken. Social media was flooded with photos, videos, and kind messages. People remembered him as a teen idol, a talented singer, and the face of the Partridge family. His former co-stars shared tributes, recalling their time together and expressing their sadness. But Susan said nothing. She didn't release a statement. She didn't attend any memorials or give interviews. Her silence was noticeable, and it wasn't an accident. She had grieved in her own way, privately and quietly. For Susan, the end of David's life wasn't just about losing a former co-star. It was about finally closing a painful chapter that had followed her for years. By staying silent, Susan held on to the boundaries she had fought so hard to create. She didn't want to be dragged back into a time that had brought her so much pain. She had spent years building a new life for herself, far away from the spotlight. She didn't want to give up that peace, even for a moment of public sympathy. As the years went by, fans continued to hope for a full Partridge family reunion. Special episodes were discussed. TV networks aired old episodes and produced documentaries. The surviving cast members showed up for interviews and anniversary events. But Susan was never among them. People speculated about her absence. Why wouldn't she join the rest of the cast, even just once? Didn't she want to reconnect with old friends? Didn't she want to thank the fans who had supported her for so long? But the truth was simple. Susan had moved on. For her, the Partridge family was a closed chapter. It had been a part of her life, but not all of it, and not the part she wanted to return to. The memories were too painful. The betrayals too deep. The story she had lived was not the cheerful one that fans saw on TV. It was full of real heartbreak that couldn't be fixed with a reunion show. Her decision to stay away wasn't about turning her back on fans. It was about protecting herself. It was about not letting others control her story anymore. While the rest of the world celebrated the past, Susan quietly chose her future. After leaving the Partridge family, Susan worked hard to become more than just a former teen star. She took on serious acting roles and earned respect in the entertainment world. Her most famous role after Laurie Partridge was Grace Van Owen in the legal drama LA Law. Her performance was powerful and intelligent, and she won a Golden Globe Award in 1988. For the first time, critics and audiences saw her not as a teen idol, but as a talented actress. Outside of acting, Susan also became involved in causes that mattered to her. She served on the board of the Rape Treatment Center at UCLA Medical Center. She worked to raise awareness about sexual violence and support survivors. She also helped narrate a documentary about campus rape, using her voice to bring attention to serious issues. In 2004, Susan quietly retired from acting. She married television producer Bernard Safronski in 1988 and has a daughter from a previous marriage. She chose a quiet life away from Hollywood, far from the cameras and headlines. She didn't need fame anymore. She had found something more important: peace. Susan Dey's life shows what it means to protect your truth, even when others don't understand it. She refused to play along with the version of her story that others wanted to tell. She refused to smile for cameras that once caused her pain. And most of all, she refused to let a painful past define her future. Her silence wasn't empty. It was powerful. It said, "I choose myself. I choose healing. I choose to move on." In a world that often values reunions, nostalgia, and happy endings, Susan showed that sometimes the bravest choice is to walk away and never look back.